reread The God of Small Things immediately after finishing it, which admittedly sounds a little ridiculous, but please hear me out. The first time I read it, it left me feeling angry, extremely angry. But accompanying this anger was a tiny nagging feeling, almost an itch, that I had overlooked something important, that there were layers in the book that I hadn't peeled back, let alone understood. So I reread it, and that reread changed everything. Here is the physical evidence, by the way. The few metaphors that I'd understood during the first read became much more meaningful when rereading, and so many others that I hadn't even noticed before danced right in front of my eyes during the reread. I had overlooked so many sentences, so many phrases, so many words as merely beautiful writing when they were actually priming me for heartbreak. The characters became richer, more human, making me realize that I hadn't really paid attention to them during the first read. I could talk about all of this: the brilliant writing, the exceptional metaphors, the emotional foreshadowing. I could talk about how amazing this book is. I could discuss all of that, but I won't. I won't, because this is not what drove a nail into my heart, although it is partly the reason that it's still lodged there. What broke my heart was the casualness with which ordinary characters return to their ordinary lives after changing someone else's forever. And that, my friend, left a question inside me that I couldn't quite get rid of. What happens when everyone tells themselves they're innocent? Welcome to Dissecting, a series where we don't ask whether a book is good. We ask what question is the book trying to answer. I'm Sukhman, and today we're investigating The God of Small Things. Before we get to the question, let's quickly talk about the plot. Masquerading as a family saga, The God of Small Things by Arundhati Roy is a monster of a book. It slowly unravels a tragedy that took place in Aymenem, Kerala in 1969 through the fragmented memories of Rahel and Esther, Ammu's twin children. A child dies accidentally, the twins' cousin, Sophie Mole, and then the twins go missing. And one man who has no social influence or political backing gets blamed for all of it. For three crimes that he did not commit, Veluta, Amu's forbidden lover, pays with his life. And that was the tragedy that the twins would continue to call the terror, even in their memories. I have something to confess. The tragedy itself wasn't what had me by the throat. It was not why I reread the book. It was the people who had walked away from this tragedy believing that they had done nothing wrong, or rather believing that what they had done was right. Now, let's do a little investigation to see if we can find an answer to our question. Some people justify themselves with the stories they tell themselves. The first is baby Kochamma, harmless lady with the little feet, or is she? Throughout the novel, she continues to tell herself stories. How it was Veluta who was responsible for her humiliation at the Marxist march. How God had punished Veluta for the humiliation she had faced. When she files a report against Veluta at the police station, she lies that he had raped Amu. And while she's telling the story to the inspector, she becomes convinced by it too. And somewhere along the way, the lie stops being a lie. It becomes the truth that she chooses to live with. And in doing so, she absolves herself of any and all sins. The second is KNM Pillai. He tells himself he had nothing to do with the entire business. He keeps quiet on purpose when the inspector asks him about Veluta. He does not refute baby Kochamma's false report, even though he knew that Veluta and Ammu's relationship was consensual. And when asked whether Veluta had any political backing, he promptly tells the inspector that he had none. He sees Veluta as a thorn in his side, and this simply seemed like the perfect opportunity to be rid of him. He tells himself that it was, and I quote, the inevitable consequence of necessary politics. The third is Inspector Thomas Matthew. He tells himself an age old story that he had set an example, that he had preserved history, that he was simply doing his job. Some people incriminate themselves with the stories they tell themselves. The first is Amu. She says it out loud. I've killed him. She says it and she believes it. Then there are Rahel and Esther. Even though they knew they had been frightened into choosing baby Kuchama's false narrative, they still held themselves responsible for what happened to Veluta. They blamed themselves for choosing themselves and their mother over Veluta's life. Some people never get the chance to tell their story at all. Veluta, the god of small things, never gets to tell his story. Why? Because no one believed he was important enough to do so. We only see him through other people's lenses, through other people's narrative. He doesn't even get to defend himself physically or verbally once the police have decided on his crimes and his punishment. Everyone else gets to explain themselves, everyone else gets to justify themselves, but Veluta never gets the chance. By the time everyone has finished telling his story, there is almost nothing left of his own. There is almost nothing left of Veluta himself, the god of loss, the god of small things. He becomes one of the small things, ones that quietly wither away, and most people don't even bat an eye. Some people spend their lives convincing themselves they were right. Others spend theirs believing they were wrong, and some are erased before they get to spend their lives doing anything at all. So, what really happens when everyone tells themselves they're innocent? When a part of the whole truth remains hidden, the half truth that gets laid out for the world to see changes everything. The truly innocent convince themselves of their guilt. There's a line in the book that captures this perfectly. All three of them, Amu, Rahel, and Esther, all three of them bonded by the certain separate knowledge that they had loved a man to death. And so they punish themselves for the rest of their lives. Amu wastes away to nothing. She dies alone in a cheap hotel room. Esther gives up on his voice. He stops talking altogether. Rahel gives up on all emotional feeling. She becomes empty eyed. The adults tell the stories, the children carry the consequences of them. They live inside these stories and they don't fully survive them. The children suffer the consequences of the stories that the adults around them had made up to preserve themselves. Empty eyed Rahel, no voice Esther. And if, my friend, if everyone is innocent, then there was no crime. There was no crime. The crime never took place, and Veluta wasn't killed because Veluta simply didn't exist. The god of small things. He became one of the small things and withered away, unseen, unheard, unnoticed. He was quietly erased from history just so everyone could maintain their innocence. This, of course, was my reading of the book. And it's only one of the many, many conversations that this book makes possible. Because this book is also about caste, about childhood, about love, about grief, politics, history, nationalism, and a dozen other things that deserve conversations of their own. But this was the question that kept tugging at my mind. Every time I thought I'd wandered away from it, the book pulled me back. It gently led me back to it. If you asked me what in this book in particular broke my heart, I couldn't possibly pinpoint one thing. It was a culmination, a coming together of events and realizations that was my undoing. Maybe that's why I couldn't leave the book alone. I had to read it again because this story is by no means an uncommon one in India. It's a fairly common story. What makes this book special is not the story itself. It is the way it is written. It is the way it is brought together. It is the way it is told. Everyone tells themselves stories. The innocent inherit these stories. Beluta loses his story. And as someone who loves stories, I genuinely did not know what to do with that. It got me thinking about all the stories I had told myself. I was never the villain in any of my own stories, so I must have become a villain in somebody else's. It's an uncomfortable truth, but it is one that I have to sit with. This book, for me, went from being a story to being a mirror. If you've read this book, I genuinely love to know what stayed with you after you finished it. Was it something completely different? Did you end up asking yourself a different question? I would love, love, love to read your thoughts in the comments. And if you simply want to discuss something about this book, really anything, if you want to discuss anything about this book, please do comment about it because I don't think that I'm ready to leave this book behind just yet. Thank you so much for watching this video, especially if you watched till the very end. Please like, share, and subscribe if you genuinely enjoyed sitting down with me for this discussion. Thank you so much once again. I'll be back soon with another dissecting video. Goodbye for now.